You lead your team. Let's talk about it. The Lead Your Firm podcast. Lessons in leadership from advisors who live it every day. Hosted by Darren Blonsky, Managing Principal at Firmata Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Contents are for educational purposes only. Nothing herein amounts to investment advice or an offer to buy or sell securities. The Lead Your Firm podcast starts now.
Well, welcome back. This is the next episode of Lead Your Firm. The podcast is set up to talk with advisors throughout the nation who have built great, successful financial planning firms for the independent advisor. I'm excited for this one. Chip is one of those guys that has his hand in everything. He's done it. He's been there. He's built an incredibly successful firm. He's published books. He's on podcasts. He does coaching. Just a wealth of knowledge. And I'm excited to learn today. What I love about these podcasts is it's an opportunity for me just to learn and to hear from others who have been really successful. So Chip, thanks for joining us today, and looking forward to diving into all about Chip.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you a little bit.
For sure. So what's the story with the big dollar sign on the wall?
So that is an original, to the extent that a dollar sign can be an original. If you're familiar with Carl Richards, author of the One-Page Financial Plan, at some point I follow him on Twitter because I refuse to call it the other name. I'm still hanging out old school on
X, huh?
No, man, not yet. And so I follow him, and at one point or another, he said, "Hey, I've got this handful of original things that I've done. I'm going to sell them for $100. Let me know." I guess he was trying to get rid of some stuff, but he's apparently great at sales because he sold me a painting of a dollar sign for $99, I think it was. So, that's what it is.
But hey, there's a cool story behind it, so that's what counts.
It is technically a Carl Richards original, even if it is just one symbol.
So that's awesome. Yeah, Carl Richards does some great stuff. I love the simplicity in which he communicates concepts and financial concepts in particular, and the interaction between that behavioral finance. And maybe one of these days I'll try and get him on here. So Chip, you run Signature Wealth Strategies. Tell us all about Signature Wealth Strategies, who you are, where you're at, how big are you, how many people, all the little things.
All the things. So sure. Signature Wealth Strategies is our, what I'd call the retail brand. It's what we present ourselves as for the most part to clients. We also have Signature Wealth Group, which similar to some of your endeavors serves kind of an advisor community, most of whom operate under Signature Wealth Strategies, a couple of whom kind of do their own thing branding wise. We've been independent. We came out of a regional broker dealer back in 2016, had about $280 million at the time in one office. We're in Florence, South Carolina. And as we sit here today in 2023, right at $2 billion, 15 offices in North and South Carolina and Kentucky, 37 advisors, and about 55 or so total team members. Darren, we're a big family business is kind of the way that I look at it. If you look at our practice, my partners and I own about half of the kind of cumulative practice, and then we have other advisors who are affiliated with us that own some of the other locations, and most, if not all, of us have some sort of family member, whether it is a parent, a child, a niece or nephew, somebody who's either in the business or that's planning to get into the business. So again, I kind of call us just a big family business.
Excellent. Well, that's a good way. And just from my interactions with you, Chip, you certainly have that big heart for your people, and that's really clear. So you're $2 billion today. Wow, that's quite the achievement in 15 offices. Are you still sitting with clients, or are you just solely managing the business at this point?
No, I've got about 50 families that I still sit with. I
Okay.
think it's hard. And yeah, a big part of putting together a group for me was trying to build a place where I would want to work, where I would want my kids. I have 4 boys, where I would want them to work. And I think that part of that for me is being able to sit in with clients as an advisor. I mean, still kind of with my sleeves rolled up, because it's hard to understand what advisors go through and to try to serve them when you're not doing it. And plus I have families, like I'm sure you do, that I've worked with for more than 2 decades, that I just enjoy. They're my friends. And so I still do some of that, but uh, obviously, at this point with an organization this size, we've got a great team, but I do still, yeah, I've had to create a practice that allows me to have time to do the other as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's definitely a balance. I think that most business owners in our space, they've been successful advisors, they've grown their practice, they brought in other advisors, and then you get to that spot where you just can't do it all and you got to be choiceful. So obviously I'm assuming you've transitioned over time and kind of had to reinvent yourself, growing as fast as you have and as big as you have. I'm curious, Chip, what are some of the resources that have helped you grow along the way and be successful and reinvent your journey?
Well, if I look at every meaningful kind of jump in capability and in ultimately success, if I look at over the 25 years that I've been doing this, all of them I can equate or correlate with um, increasing capabilities of partnering with other people. An example of that, a year into the business ish, maybe a little less than that, realized pretty quickly I was 23. My partner was 27. At the time, I was alone, and I brought in a couple $1 million of friends and family's money. But that was probably all that there was in terms of folks that I knew, and realized pretty quickly it was going to be hard to do it alone. And talked with another young guy in my office about partnering up with he and his dad, and that then led from, again, a few $1 million to being part of a team with, at the time, somewhere between 60 and 70. Fast forward 7 or 8 years, had another mentor who wanted a younger advisor. I was still younger at the time, and was able to do some work with him. He ultimately had some bad business stuff go down, and he parted ways with our firm. And so my partner and I continued to do work there, and then we decided to go independent and to transition our entire business model. But not long after that, hired the guy who's now our chief operating officer, and that partnership has led to having somebody with, I do consider myself a leader, don't consider myself much of a manager. And so by partnering with him, his name is Barry Dedge, um, I've been able to get the capabilities to take those next steps. It's very much a Dan Sullivan who, not how approach, in terms of the biggest leaps forward are finding ways to collaborate with other people.
You make a really interesting point. And in that book Clarity we were talking about earlier, we talk a little bit about that leadership versus manager. So you say, hey, I'm a leader, I'm not a manager. Define what that leadership means in this space for you. And what does that mean? Why do you say that?
Sure. Well, because if you look at my strengths finder, for example, my top 2 strengths were woo, winning others over, and futurist. And so, I consider myself to be pretty good at getting a grasp of where things are going, and then being able to get others to come along. And that's a big part of my role in our organization. Now, I think casting the vision and bringing other people kind of under the tent, if you will, is a big part of leadership. Management, on the other hand, a lot of the tracking and accountability, the day-to-day stuff. Quite honestly, whether it's in business or at home, I have 4 boys. I don't know that I was the best parent when it comes to discipline and really staying after things. Fortunately, they've got a mom who is very much that way. And so for me, that's kind of how I would categorize the difference. One is more forward looking and again, kind of bringing people under the tent. The other is more of a day-to-day operations kind of strength.
Yeah, going along with Dan Sullivan's stuff, he talks a lot about integrators, right? And
For sure.
EOS has a similar stuff kind of idea that you have these visionaries that drive these orgs, and as any org grows, right, you get these roles. It sounds like you are, Chip, where you're more visionary, you're more futurist, you're looking at where we need to go, and then you've got people with you that know how to execute on that piece. That relationship can be really great and can be really traumatic. What's worked in that relationship in your firm, and why has it been?
I mean, I would say that the only way that it works is lots of communication in any relationship, whether it's marital, whether it's that, my partner Scott and I have been together for 25 years, and a big part of our relationship. And he is, our deal was I would do the planning. I've had an interest in that. He had an interest in actually managing portfolios and things like that. And a key to that relationship working is lots of communication and trust. And the same is true. We operate on EOS, and the integrator visionary relationship is very much that same way. The other part is you have to be willing to put your ego aside. I think a big part of it's hard for particularly people who consider themselves to be visionary. My theory is you're not a leader if nobody will follow you. And a big part of that, I think, is being willing to the book Rocket Fuel, where it talks a lot about visionary and integrator, calls that group a 2-piece puzzle. And I think that's a real strength in the relationship that I have with our COO is there are things that I'm not good at that he is, and he says, just let me handle this part, kind of this is in my wheelhouse, and vice versa. And both of us go about it without a ton of ego, particularly not with one another. You can't be in this business long without having some form of ego, but particularly with one another and not getting hung up on org charts and things like that. It's really more about communicating and figuring out how to do the best next right thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And being able to kind of step away from that, being the only one in the room that sucks oxygen out, it's pretty important, for sure. So in your leadership capacity, Chip, and what you do for your firm, you've got, 55 people. Tell me about what you guys do to develop your people, to work with your people, to grow your bench strength. How does that work in your organization?
Sure. Well, our biggest kind of thing, what we hang our hat on is, our goal is to be the best community in the industry, but in the country. And a big part of that is taking care of, I'm a football coach in the afternoons, and every coach has 3 keys to winning the game. It doesn't matter if you're talking about Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, one of those West Coast coaches. You can tell me who those guys are. I don't know. But the biggest thing for us is, and this is true in a practice, but also in a group like ours, is to keep what you have, keep the herd together. Second is to grow relationships, and third is to make new friends. And a big part of keeping what you have is focusing a lot on community. What we do in that space in particular, we, like lots of people, particularly after COVID, have regular routine meetups on Zoom for the operations team, but also for the advisors. But probably more important than that, and we've been doing it for about 18 months now, we get together, 3 or 4 times a year and do actual masterminds, very similar to the one that you and I participate in, where we get together in person and we sit down with one another and actually walk through what's going on in our practice. And we have found that to be incredibly helpful, because being in a distributed organization like ours, there's something to be said for being in physical proximity and the meeting after the meeting, if you will, and getting your people together. And it really does a lot for culture and relationships to get together. So we do the online stuff. We also get our folks together. And then once a year, in fact, it was just this past week for us, we get our entire company together somewhere that, firm provided. We all met up this past week in Charlotte for a couple of days. There were, I think, 45 of us or so there, spending time together, both learning and the professional development side of things, but also, just kind of hanging out. And it really adds a lot to the digital environment when people have had an opportunity to meet and hang out with one another. That Teams thread that you have going on about whatever, or the Zoom that you're going to have where all your advisors are getting together and sharing best practices. There's just a lot more communication, even in the digital form, because we've gotten together in person.
That makes sense. So let's go back to those masterminds. When you do these masterminds, who's facilitating them?
So most of the time, I function as kind of the facilitator, just to keep things going. But based on feedback that we've gotten, kind of as we go, people give feedback each time, and we modify them a little bit. The first couple were very much designed around me, meaning I didn't have to do much work. I just kind of showed up and pointed things along. We've added a little more structure to that. So one of our team members kind of helps pull in some additional resources. But yeah, we just do it internally, because a lot of it is just taking time. Very much like you asking me questions and having this conversation on a podcast. It's a very similar dynamic to just sit and have almost, we do kind of the hot seat method. We did that for a couple of times. Eventually, you have some people who don't really love that format. And so we broke it up into topics, so that you're not being redundant for 7 different people who have a question about marketing. We then eventually evolved into topics. And again, you have somebody like me, or in your case, maybe somebody like yourself, who's just facilitating, just keeping things going, asking questions.
Got it. And how many people do you usually have in your mastermind groups?
We've averaged 14 advisors per. So we've done 5 of them, I think now. We've averaged 14. So we probably have 9 or 10 that have been to all of them. And then some of the others have kind of come in and out, depending on schedules and things like that. And what we do is, rather than doing it in a place where we're in a hotel, we do Airbnb. And the first couple of them, we got like a 14-bedroom house. The last couple, we've gotten 3 or 4 kind of 4 or 5 bedroom houses, so that we can all stay. Because again, it's not necessarily all about the conversation with other people. It's, or I guess in the meeting, it's the opportunity to be together around the kitchen table, or to just to spend time hanging out or doing some sort of athletic activity.
All right, so I'm going to report again. They'll be able to splice it in and out. So I think the question is, how many people do you guys have in your masterminds, and how do you structure? Is it 4? Is it 5? You're kind of facilitating this thing.
Yeah, so we've averaged about 14, so including me. So we've done it about 5 times. My guess is we've had 9 or 10. I haven't looked that have been to all of them, and then there are another 4 or 5 that kind of come and go depending on scheduling and things like that. So, and then the way that we operate, we've evolved. Originally, it was I would facilitate again in a hot seat type format, so very little on my end. Preparation involved more of a bring an issue and let's talk it out with the group. And then what we found was some people weren't real crazy about the hot seat, kind of having to be up at the front of the room. It's not really their thing. Plus, we ran into some situations where 4 or 5 people have the same kind of issue. So over time, we just changed it or morphed it into topics. So we may have a couple hours that we talk about marketing, and people bring up all the different things they're either doing or struggling with in that realm, and then client service. And it really is a free flowing conversation of a group of advisors. One of the neatest conversations we've had was around pricing, and an advisor bringing in a presentation that he had done for a prospective client the week before and getting some outside perspective on how he had priced it and how he was sharing that and whether or not he should discount and some things like that. And the prospect actually ended up asking follow-up questions and responding while we were all together. So he had done a presentation, and then later he could come back to the group and say, I actually got an email from them. This is what they said. And it was super interactive and I think really helpful. The biggest thing is, and I don't know if I said this earlier, is that we don't do it in a hotel. So we rent Airbnbs, either one big one or multiple small ones right there together, so that it's less about just the meeting. But one time we played pickup basketball at night. Another time we played pickleball. We've been and doing just various. We went to an axe throwing place one time. So you're just spending some time together, because a lot of this stuff, it's hard to let your guard down and have serious conversations about things that are important to you but private, and especially if it's something you're struggling with people you don't know very well. And so what we have found is just the building community part makes the business part a lot better, because like and trust these people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now, are you guys based mostly in North Carolina, South Carolina? Is that kind of your footprint currently?
Yeah, so 14 of the 15 offices are in North or South Carolina. If I was looking off the top of my head, it's probably 33% South Carolina, 66 North Carolina. So most of the offices, we're technically headquartered, I think, out of my office here in Florence, South Carolina, but just sheer density of advisor population, we've had more, I guess, volume traction-wise in North Carolina so far.
Got it. So tell me about the future. Where are you headed?
Great question. Recently finished and shared with our team last week the book The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. Yeah, I'm sure you probably read it, but a big part of what he talks about is being built for resiliency rather than stability. About the fact that in an infinite game, there are known and unknown players, and a big part is playing rather than playing to win, because there's no way to win business or life. The only way to win is by your own definition and rules. You play to make sure that the game continues. And I think a big part, given our industry and all the changes that are going on, is, while we fully expect and anticipate growth, that's really important. It's most important to grow with the right kind of people. And so I think that's a big part of it. You want to get to a certain critical mass. I feel like to some extent we've gotten there. One of the things that I think is going to be most interesting, at least for our organization, so I've done kind of an age wave of our advisors. And as it turns out, this past week, I turned 48. The average advisor at Signature is 47.8. So I sit kind of in the middle, and it is looking at the demographic trends of older senior advisors and the gap between them and younger advisors. And again, we're young, relatively speaking, but so a big part for me is bridging that gap between the two and being able to impart wisdom and develop young people. But also, I think a lot of advisors have a hard time with the idea of retirement. If you build a great practice, why would you want to retire from it? And so there appears to be, because our oldest advisor, I think, is 78. Our youngest is 23. My oldest son just got licensed and all, and is working with us. So we run the gambit from, again, almost 80 to in the 20s. And I see, as the advisors, even in our group, that are a little younger than average age, there's going to continue to come a point where that transition is real, particularly for folks who don't know what they're going to transition to, is going to be a really big deal. And so that's a big focus for me personally, because of our advisor population, is really figuring out how I can help our advisors impart experience and wisdom to a younger generation so that they can help clients in a way that's a win-win. Because I think that's a real positive opportunity for both sides of the age equation. The more senior advisor can continue to build on their legacy. We're in a relationship business. The idea of retiring means all of a sudden you're not of service to the people that you served all these years anymore. And so for me, I think that's the biggest part. I'm not super concerned. You and I both use AI. I had it take a transcription of a conversation between my wife and I, and
you're a brave man, Chip.
Yep. Recorded it. It was a 15. So my wife just took a new job, and she's not super fond of how I do laundry. And so we just had a conversation. I had her teach me how to do it, and I recorded it, transcribed it, put the transcription into Chat GPT, and had it make me a bullet pointed list of how my wife wanted me to do laundry. So I am not tech averse, but I think that we're in a business where I don't worry about being displaced. AI can do stuff like that. It actually got most of it right. I've sent it to her for editing just to make sure that it's right. But it's good for stuff like that. It's good for us being bionic, if you will, to be able to use it to be able to employ things. But I'm not super concerned about that. I really think that a lot of it, I think we're as in danger of not passing on the soft skills to our other humans that are in our life than we are about the robots coming and taking us out. So again, I think a big part of success is being more us.
You made an interesting point where you said, I'm really thinking a lot about how do I bridge that gap between these older advisors that have been in the industry forever and those younger advisors. In your mind, what is that gap?
Well, I mean, a big part of it is experience. If you look at, and it's not unique to us, but particularly as knowledge workers, our value over time comes from our experience. Had a pastor one time say, experience or good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from bad decisions. And senior people over time have developed wisdom, which is above and beyond information. We work the same number of hours, but we're worth more to our clients, and that is the difference between the actual time worked and the value is wisdom. And I think that is the practical application of the information, both academically and behaviorally, is something that it has to be learned, and it takes time. And the surest way to be able to transfer it, and to transfer it more quickly, is to do it intentionally. And I think that's one of the biggest components. A big gap, Darren, in our line of work. Somebody asked the other day, why is there such a gap between the 40s and the 20s, let's say? And it's 2008. I mean, they shut down the training programs for the most part for several years. And it's created what I think is a unique opportunity. But I do think that we, as again, I say older in terms of I'm 48, but I've been doing this for 25 years. We can bring along a next generation of younger advisors who are in their 20s and 30s a lot faster by really working with them, again, on some of the soft skill type stuff of just dealing with people, especially the super young. I don't get into all the generational Xers and Zers and all that stuff. But I mean, you look at kids coming out of college now, half their time was on Zoom. The art of dealing with a person IRL, right, in real life is dramatically different. And I think some of them have missed out on the opportunity to hone in on some of those skills.
I think we're getting past it as a society, but certainly out in here, California, when they shut things down for COVID, they really shut it down out here, and probably more so than some other parts of the nation. And talking to teachers after our kids all started going back to school, and there was really a really apparent behavioral issue with a lot of kids, especially some of the kids that their parents had to work. There was no one home, the year and a half where they stared at the screen, maybe, in addition to the academic loss time, but there was also the social part of it. And it's been really interesting to watch how the schools are adapting, how we're adapting as parents, trying to adjust for that. But we've certainly noticed that in some of our children as well. And I can't imagine that doesn't carry into the workforce on some level and create other issues. So a couple of the other individuals I've talked to have brought up, and we've talked about this whole virtual versus in-person balance that I think a lot of organizations are wrestling with. How have you guys dealt with the in-person work versus the virtual work, and how it was in the perception of what people were willing to do? And I think there's definitely a generational thing there too. And how does that show up in your org, not showed up, and how have you dealt with it?
It's been interesting, right? I think that we got 5 years of advancement in about 5 weeks in March of 2020. We took where we would have been maybe closer to 2025 or 2028 and fast forwarded it all the way to 2020. We were already distributed, having multiple offices. We already used Zoom. We already had VoIP phones. So some of that was, from a technology standpoint, we were prepared for. What I think, honestly, it has done is it has changed client behavior. I mean, I live in a relatively small town in South Carolina where most of my clients who live here could get here within 20 minutes. And we're not talking about traffic in a matter of blocks. I mean, they could come 15 miles in 20 minutes. And it suits them just to do Zoom for business related stuff and get together for personal things. As far as our team goes, it's provided a lot of flexibility. So our administrative staff, as we returned, I think we got the way I approached it, Darren, was it was a unique opportunity when we closed down for 10 weeks completely. Here in the Southeast, we were a little quicker to make changes perhaps than you had to deal with. We closed down for 10 weeks. And so my philosophy was instead of going from 5 days a week in the office, to 3 days a week in the office, let's say, for example, or 4 days a week in the office. At this point, we had been at 0 days in the office. And so whatever we were doing in person, we were adding back. So for me personally, for a long time, I came back Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And the way that I looked at it was I didn't take away 2 days that I used to be in the office. I added 3 days that for the last 3 months I hadn't been in the office. And we extended that then to some of our administrative staff. So it's allowed us to give more freedom and flexibility to team members other than advisors. I think advisors have historically had pretty good flexibility. Pay a price for that, no doubt. But it's also allowed us to be able to do things like share support staff among multiple offices, which prior to we had not been able to do. I think it's opened up a lot of possibilities, not only for the work side of things, but also the work-life balance side of things as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's fascinating. It's definitely been a balance. It's certainly been a positive for our organization. And someone said the other day to me, they said, I'd sure love to meet everybody. And I said, well, good luck, because we're never in one place except for maybe once a year.
Yeah. Well, and I think it makes it that much more important, though, right? I mean, you have to, there are lots of virtual work books out there, some of which were out there pre-COVID, about how you have to be intentional about bringing folks together. And again, like you and I here, using cameras and having camera on meetings. But I will say, going back to the concept of the masterminds and the annual kind of get together, the more frequently you get together in person and at least get to make those connections, what I've found is all of the other communication, whether it's getting people to turn the camera on, getting engaged in a digital forum like Microsoft Teams, all of the other stuff improves when we as humans have had an opportunity to get together and build some community.
Yeah, I think well said. And I think that's, a good way to wrap it up for today. And Chip, I really appreciate you spending the time sharing a little bit about what you're doing in your world with us. And congrats on all your success. I mean, you're knocking it out of the park. And so if you haven't checked out Chip, check out his website. Lots going on there. He's got a couple books, The Retirement Remix. I just ordered myself a copy to check it out. So I'm excited. So next time I see you, I think in Florida here in the wintertime, I'll make sure to get it signed by you, Chip.
Yeah, now I'll bring my copy of Clarity too. So
all good. We should have a book signing event for everybody.
There you go. There you go. I bet we'd sell at least one a piece. I'll buy one of yours. You can buy one of mine. And again, I will say though, not to be overly you promoting, but as somebody with 15 or so younger advisors in our organization, and as somebody who's interested in bridging that leadership gap, really, really enjoyed Clarity. And again, kind of the storytelling component of it, I found it super easy to digest, and for anybody, regardless of kind of where they are in their age or stage, to relate to. So I really did enjoy that, no joke.
Awesome. Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And that was the hope, is to make it a book you could read from, on the plane from San Francisco to New York, and was more of a story. I've got piles of nonfiction below my feet here of books to read on the list, and you can pull someone in on a story, that the brain is wired for it, right?
For sure.
Well, thanks, Chip. Appreciate your time, and we will certainly be in touch.
Sounds good, man. See you soon.
Take care. All right.
Take your next step in leadership. Go to leadyourfirm.com for more practical lessons in leadership for RIAs. Find the book, Clarity, at leadyourfirm.com and Amazon. Subscribe now to catch future episodes of the Lead Your Firm podcast. This podcast is a production of Fermata Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor, headquartered in Sonoma, California. Contents are for information purposes only. Nothing herein amounts to investment advice or an offer to buy or sell securities. Fermata Advisors does not provide tax or legal advice. thank you for listening to the end. True leaders read the fine print. See you next episode.